Good morning. This is Marilyn Thompson for UV Tag presentation. The date is January 11th, and I'm here in Alpine, Utah on a snowy day. Our presentation with James Tanner will begin in just a minute. Usually we like to start with a prayer, and we'd ask Catherine Grant if she would do that for us.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to come before you this morning as friends and as lovers of family history. We're grateful for the privilege of doing this great work, and we're also grateful to be hearing from James this morning. We ask thee please to bless him with thy spirit, that he'll be able to communicate the things that he desires, and we pray also that our hearts will be open and that we'll learn things that will help us serve thee better. We ask for thy spirit to be with us in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
This broadcast is seen by people from all over. It is on Facebook as well as Zoom. And so, if those that are watching via Facebook, if you would like to perhaps let us know where you're watching from, we are interested in that. Also, if you have questions, please post the questions either on the chat on Zoom, or if you are watching Facebook, if you could post it in the Facebook comments, then we could bring those up. Also, UV Tag, this is the time of year when we renew our subscription. If you'll go to the website, uvtag.org, then you're able to either renew your subscription for $15 a year or else join. And that gives you access to videos and to emails reminding you or informing you about the presentations. This coming year, we have chosen to have only one presentation on the second Saturday of each month. And today we have James Tanner, who is going to be our presenter. James has over 40 years of experience in genealogical research. He has a wonderful blog, Genealogy Star, that I have read for many years and enjoyed myself. He served as a family history volunteer for 18 years, was in Arizona. He's presented at expos and conferences around the U.S. and Canada and Europe. He's a member of the board of directors of the Family History Guide Association, and he's currently serving at BYU Family History Library. James is an attorney and a professional photographer and has 7 children, 34 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. The presentation is entitled Getting Out of the Rut of Your Genealogical Research. So, James, we'll turn the time over to you now.
Well, thank you. We're going to talk today about getting out of the rut of your genealogical research. The illustration here was AI generated, but it comes from an actual photograph that I had of my father, who was driving a hay truck up on the Indian reservation, the Diné Reservation or Navajo Indian Reservation, and got stuck in a rut and basically had to take all of the hay off the truck and then get it pulled out and then get going again by loading the track up. So I think there's some lessons to be learned from that, and I thought it was quite an interesting idea here. Um, there's a statement in Arizona, and I don't know how current it is because I don't, because a lot of the roads that were looking like this road that were quite familiar to us are now well paved. So we're not really into this getting stuck in ruts for much. But if you haven't ever been stuck in a rut, you don't know the problem. The problem is that the rut's deeper than the wheel, and so you can't turn your car, you can't turn around, and you can't do anything but keep driving until you can get out of that rut. And so this was a statement that we heard a lot of time in my youth, and that is choose your rut because you're going to be in it for a long time. And it's really kind of applicable to what we do here as in genealogy and our genealogical research. Point out just some very simple ones, the rut of continually working on the same family line to the exclusion of other lines. It seems like we choose the idea that we're only related to our surname line, for example, and so we do work on our surname line over and over again. Um, this is something that happens quite frequently. I, have a lot of different responses to give to people when they're in this kind of situation. But the most important thing from my standpoint, is that when we're doing genealogy, it's very difficult to keep going back and back in time. Eventually, you are inevitably going to reach a point where you're either copying records out of old books that don't have any sources listed and you don't know the reliability of, or you're simply running out of records. It's just the nature of where we're living, and that happens in genealogy in the 1500s. Uh, Most of the records being kept about individuals ceased to be in existence at that point throughout Europe and in many other places. Now, this isn't particularly applicable to people who have Chinese or Japanese, Asiatic traditions, because some of their family records that are kept by the individual families go back hundreds and hundreds of years and even into more than 1,000 years in some cases. But that's not the situation with most of the Western European tradition. So basically, we get into the situation where we are researching the same person repeatedly without results. Uh, the examples that I'm using today are taken from the Family Search family tree. They're in my ancestral line, and I'm very much uh, aware of and looking at these different people. You notice about this particular entry that he was born in 1755, apparently. If that's kind of strange, because it may or may not, we may or may not have an actual birth record, and died in 1828. But there's only 4 sources listed here. And if you look at how much information's been done, these are the changes that have been done. This is just a partial listing of the changes. Um, get a little bit closer look at the kinds of changes. So all of these changes are being added and taken over time. And you see there's some that are, uh, well, not current to the date of today, because some of these slides are a little bit older. But basically, uh, there's this going on constantly, going back and forth, but none of that's being done with sources. It's simply people copying from various other pedigrees and things that they have in their possession, and sort of defending their pedigree position, even though there are no sources supporting what they have to say. Now, what does that really entail? What am I talking about when I say there's no sources? When I say that, that's kind of a jargon term used in genealogy for the fact that there's no historical record that shows this person, John Hamilton, actually being born. Um, and so the dates are sort of in there as a guess, if possible, and the rest of the records are not available. But in this particular case, what I'm focusing on, and I'll go back to oops, excuse me, wrong direction there. I'll go back to this long list, is people are going in and making changes to this. So they're spending a lot of time. In other words, they're focusing on this individual to the exclusion of other individuals in their where they would have an opportunity to find more information. If anybody who was working on this had done any, say, basic genealogical research into records other than the ones that were immediately available online and or in the place where this person lived, then perhaps there might be an opportunity to understand what was going on here. But in the absence of that, the question is, why are people spending all this time uh, on this particular line if they're not producing anything that is new or has any kind of new information? And that's kind of the underlying key to what I'm talking about here. It's the rut of researching over and over again without actually just doing the same research over and or looking at the same sources every time. And the sources aren't going to change. The books, the records, the certificates, or whatever we're looking at, uh, you're not going to find a new number on a certificate that you've seen before. And until you actually break out of that rut of looking at the same person, you're not really going to make any headway. And this second one is what we call the rut of looking at the same record collections and no others. I can go on to uh, Family Search, and in a few seconds, I can open up any number of people with records on Family Search, on the Family Search family tree, that have the same set of records. They have birth, marriage, and death records if they are in existence during the time the person lived, because many records, birth, marriage, and death records, are no longer available as you go back further in time. But what is really remarkable is that you can find any number of people who are the only records that have been found for that person are either a birth record or substitute, a marriage record, or a death record, maybe not even all three, and some census records, maybe one or two census records or more. But that's as far as they've gone. And the rut I'm talking about here is living with this kind of limited view. You're driving down the same path every time you go back through what you've done on your genealogy. So many people tell me, oh, they just, there's really not much I can do and whatever. And I look on uh, their part of the family tree and I find out that, they, for instance, they have not ever looked at all the census records. Well, the reason that might be helpful is you may find missing family members. You may find some information that you didn't know that was in existence. And the recommendation I have is that you do every single person on your in your area of the family tree and your pedigree and their descendants should have uh, attached a copy of any census record throughout the whole of the period of their lives. So that way you can get some realistic, more realistic idea of how this person lived. But just knowing the fact that going to other sources may turn up information that you have never even thought about talking about or thinking about, and that's like the most common of these that I find to be not completely ignored but very seldom used are land and property and probate records, and there's obviously a reason for that because of the difficulty in raising and using those records. So I guess the issue is that perhaps you're comfortable in your rut and you don't realize that there are Everest-sized genealogical challenges awaiting your efforts. I guess one of my examples from my own uh, particular uh, the pedigrees and things that I have on my own family tree, part of family tree, family search family tree, going back in time, is back to one of my great great grandparents who are great grandparents whose name was Charles Godfrey Jarvis de Vries, uh, or around the other way around, Charles Godfrey de Vries Jarvis, because his original name was de Vries, and when he married his wife, he around that time he took the name of Jarvis. So his line went back, according to my grandmother, who had, or great grandmother, who had done a great deal of research, went back only a couple of generations in England and began to, and that was it. And the comment in her, she published a book of all this genealogy, which we have in our family. And her comment was, there's just no records. We have nothing, no way of going any further back. Well, I had looked at this from time to time and really hadn't focused much on it. I did find a few more records about the people in England, but that none of that was conclusive. But what I did find eventually, and when I looked at it more critically, and that's been in the last few years, um, is that there were sources available, and perhaps there were new sources available, and I realized finally that they were sources that hadn't been available previously. And as I followed that back, I found that uh, a group of people out of Israel. They were turning out, these were Jewish people that are in my family line, and a group of people in Israel had done extensive research on every resource, from every resource they could, and had documented back, clear back into the 1600s. So that line was fully documented back to the 1600s. And so that into Netherlands. And from that point on, then there was a huge number of additional work that I could do on that particular line. But if you are sort of looking at it and saying, well, I don't know how to go further, I don't know what I can do here. And so I'm just going to let that go. And I'm sure somebody else will find it. Well, that isn't really a very uh, expansive view. So what we'd like to do is get you out there in that cold and the height and the difficulty of doing things that are outside of uh, your common experience and your comfort level. So one of the things I think is important to understand is that genealogy is difficult. And sometimes there's been a kind of a movement lately to generally say it's fun, it's easy, and you can just go on Family Search or Ancestry or one of the websites and click and you'll have your ancestry. Well, that's not exactly accurate, and it's certainly not true that it's easy. Uh, I don't know how many of us would categorize it as fun either, but it's a lot. Most of it's a lot of work. But that you can understand that there are these different challenges that can be considered as difficult as climbing a mountain. What's happening today, though, is that we are getting some new tools, and just like with my example of the De Vries line and that Jewish line in the Netherlands, we're finding there's more and more access to records. And one of the biggest thing of the events that's occurring lately that's going to open up a tremendous amount of genealogical research that hasn't been possible previously is when you're using artificial intelligence like Family Search and Ancestry and others are doing uh, to do handwriting recognition. And that's now a mature technology. And it's basically allowing Family Search to provide uh, complete searches, what are called full text searches, into uh, literally millions of documents as they're working to get this completed. And as they mentioned in last at last Roots Tech last year, their intention is to do this with all of the records they have on the Family Search website. So, what are some of these challenges? What are the things that we think in genealogy are really keeping us in a rut? In other words, they're keeping us from doing the work any differently than we've been doing it for some time. Or if we're just starting out, we, as this said, choose your rut carefully. And so for this is to choose what you want to be able to learn and do with genealogy. Um, the first one that I would say would help to get you out of this situation is to prepare and go to an archive and then gain admission and do original research into historical documents. Now, most of the states in the United States have an accessible state archives, and it's important that at some point you gain some an idea of what kinds of records they have and have spent some time uh, looking at those records and seeing how much more that might help you. Um, we can think of the national archives like the U.S. National Archives, and there's most other countries also have a, a national archives and or may also have local archives. I've been recently doing quite an extensive amount of research in England and have become aware that every single county in England has an archive as well as the National Archives. So these are things that the question is have you ever tried to or done any research in an archive? And um, that's one of the things that I think is an important difference between staying in your own comfort zone and moving into a more expansive one. My wife and I had the opportunity of spending a year at the Maryland State Archives in Annapolis, Maryland, digitizing records for Family Search. And as a result of my being there, uh, I had a few people who contacted me and asked if I could do research for them there in the archive. So uh, that was an opportunity for me to get to know with much greater depth the holdings of the archive of that particular archive. But that's not necessary that you spend that kind, but I would guess that is a rather time-consuming possibility. Here's another one, and that is to learn a language spoken by your ancestors well enough to read documents in that language. Now, that doesn't mean you can speak or you could travel in the country or you could do anything else because the language involved with genealogy is fairly what you'd call a narrow group of terms. Of course, we do come across things every day when we're doing research that we don't know, even if we have an extensive knowledge of the language. Today, I was working on a excerpt of language from a marriage record in Mexico, and the language had changed because there was a phrase there that was in Latin. So that was the kind of thing that you might need to know. Now, this is a very interesting one. It's prepare and travel to the country of origin of your ancestors and see the places they lived and talk to your relatives who still live in the country. Um, this especially applies if your close ancestors, let's say they're your grandparents, your parents, your grandparents, or your great grandparents, came from another country and when we're not and came to wherever you live. And so going to the places they came from and doing your research, and especially in this case, DNA testing and getting DNA tests, you may very well find a group of people in the place your ancestors left from to who are related to you and that you can contact them and talk to them. And over the years, I have had dozens of people who have done this. Some of my friends, as I've talked to them, have gone to all sorts of places, Switzerland, the Scandinavian countries, Germany, um, doing the research in advance and getting names of actual contacts that you've made in the country is is a way to get an extensive amount. And one of my friends went into, uh, I believe, Chechnya, and in Chechnya he went to had found some names through DNA and through other things, and he contacted the people and was able to go to talk to them, and he asked them, "Oh, do you happen to have any language, any information about your family?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, you just need to go over here and talk to this person, who's our family genealogist in a sense." And he went there and found an extensive genealogy of his family that had been prepared in big charts and everything from this ancestor who willingly let him copy that information. And so you can well find this kind of opportunity if you break out of what you think you're doing all the time. And then the ultimate, I guess, is to start teaching classes and presenting at conferences. Those of us who uh, like to do this and do it frequently are, very comfortable, but some of people may be very much getting out of their comfort zone to try to teach a class or present at a conference. And so these are kinds of things that help you. And there are many more challenges out there. If you just keep learning and thinking about what they could be, there's just a lot of things out there that have to do with record preservation or having to do with the access to the records or whatever else is happening. So how do you avoid getting into a rut in the first place? Well, one of the ways you avoid it in this northern Arizona, southern Utah type uh, scene that we have here is that you don't go on roads that are are totally sand or muddy, and so otherwise you'll get stuck. But in this case, in genealogical standpoint, we can the real underlying thing that we need to look at is to look for when you see these different goals, they all involve taking time to learn something, and that means taking time out of whatever day, week, month you've got to spend time learning enough to get this to happen. Um, Fortunately, some of the things that I do, like learning, like helping and doing support in the Spanish language around the world are things that we learned because we went, in this case, on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and learned to speak Spanish by going and living in Argentina for 2 years. But after that, I spent a considerable amount of time learning more and more Spanish and becoming more proficient in being able to do research in Spanish. And so that's kind of the kind of thing that you can do now. Perhaps you think you're too late in your life, it's too difficult, and the answer to that is there's always things to learn, and it's someday, uh, every day you probably wake up if you're working in genealogy uh, more than just a, of a casual basis, you'll find that there's many opportunities and things that you don't understand that you can learn about that aren't as difficult as learning a language. And to remind everyone that we all had to start somewhere. And I spent probably the first 10 or so years of maybe more than that, of my doing research into my family before I even realized that there were genealogy conferences or that anyone else that I knew that I had never met anybody who was interested in genealogy. And so it was kind of an awakening time for me when I got to start getting involved in classes and in conferences and things because I had never had that contact for quite a considerable time after I started. You may think you know enough to get going on the family tree, and I find this to be very common. I talk to people and they say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm fine." I ask them if they have any questions, and they go, "Well, no, I don't. I'm, pretty comfortable with what I'm doing and I understand everything." And my answer, I don't, I really don't have an answer to that because basically it's not even possible. It's an impossible situation. Uh, every day I have to go through the process of learning something that I didn't know before. Genealogy, just as a sense, is forever opening new avenues where you have to learn additional things. If you're going to do research, for instance, in any particular place outside of your comfort zone, you're going to have to learn a lot about the records and a lot about the history of that particular area. And it could be that that would be taking more time. But you know that they're just it's just incredible to or important, and it's incredible to me that people simply don't understand the fact that if I come up to them and ask them, "Do you have any questions?" What I'm asking them is, "Are you learning anything?" And when they tell me that they don't have any questions, the answer that I'm thinking is, well, that means you're not learning. You're not doing anything that's outside of your comfort zone. So most of us only learn something when we actually need to learn it. Um, so for instance, going to a class and even like this class, and unless you are particularly concerned about some avenue of research or some effort that you're trying to make in learning, you're not really going to benefit from it. It's not going to say, "Oh man, that really helped because that answers this question." But every day, almost without fail, that I'm working intensely in genealogical issues, I'm having to learn things. I have to learn things. The most recent complication of my life is learning the jurisdictions of both Canada and England. Uh, we might think it's real simple that England has 48 counties, and the answer is yes, but try and figure out what their government is and where the records are. And you'll begin to learn something about complication and how much study and how much questions you can really have. Fortunately, there are avenues online now where many, many, many of the questions you ask can be answered. And if you're working with an AI chatbot like Microsoft's Copilot or Apple's Gemini, excuse me, Google's Gemini, or any of the others that are popping up or around like ChatGPT, you now have an access to asking questions. So only thing you have to worry about is they may give you the wrong answer. So that maybe take a little bit more time in your life. But this is really a time in the world when you can make considerable progress. One of the ways to start, and I'm a little bit prejudiced this way because we work with the Family History Guide, both Ann and I do, my wife and I. But uh, the Family History Guide is a tremendously valuable resource. Recently, the Family History Guide became the official education partner of the National Genealogical Society. So all of the societies affiliated with the NGI with NGA are now um, learning about and being are told or shown that the Family History Guide is a resource for training and a tool for learning about family history. So this is an extremely expansive free site, free, um, that is available to help you get basic information about almost any place in the world. So here's some areas of skills advancement. If if you want to learn, if you don't want to tackle learning how to do German research, for example, but there's some other skills that you might want to become familiar with. One is reading old handwriting. You want to get into that and understanding legal documents, including deeds, wills, and probate files. That may be a challenge. Learning how to do research in a language not your own. That is always a challenge. Understanding and using migration patterns. Uh, it, it, the thing about migration patterns, for example, is that when you know the migration patterns here, if I say, use the United States as an example in the colonies previously, if you know where the people came from and you're using that as a uh, you say there came from, this is this, okay, this is the common situation that occurs. I have someone that says, this person was born in Massachusetts and they got married in Virginia and then they died in South Carolina. And my answer is, those are not, that can't possibly be one person. It is almost, it is almost because of the migration patterns and who settled in Massachusetts as opposed to who settled in Virginia and South Carolina is so different that it's not, and the time period, of course, the time period when this happens is always in the 1700s or even the 1600s. And so from that standpoint, we say, uh, and so knowing the migration, knowing where these people came from, generally speaking, and where they may have gone after they came to America is important in understanding and structuring what you're doing with your genealogical research. And of course, I wouldn't want to leave out cluster research, where we're doing research beyond the immediate family members of whatever we're talking about here, whoever's family, and moving out to friends, neighbors, relatives, and everyone else who can possibly give more information. The simple way to do this is if you're using in the time period of from 1850 to the present, is the U.S. Census records if you're doing research in the United States, because basically they're neighborhood location organized. And so the people who are listed next to your family on the census are people who are their neighbors. And if you don't know where your family came from, or the exact place, you might want to do research on all their neighbors and see if anyone of them else has recorded where they happen to come from. You can also watch a genealogy video on youtube.com. There are many of them, many hundreds and perhaps thousands of videos available. And right now, the BYU Library Family History Center has just passed the 1,000 videos mark. And of course, these are all free to watch on the BYU Library Family History channel on youtube.com. I suggest another thing is to take an online class on genealogy. Um, there are self-teaching classes. This happens to be the Learning Center from Family Search. If you want an initial challenge in your learning about the various things, you may want to take a challenge of finding this on the Family Search website. It's tucked away down a number of clicks down through the little question mark that's up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And you have to kind of keep clicking on learning and learning until you finally get here. But basically what you have here is the courses that are taught to all of the volunteers who work at the library, at Family Search Library in Salt Lake and in BYU and in many other locations. This is MyHeritage, and they have actually a genealogy course in their knowledge base. And if you look at their address, it's education.myheritage.com. And once you get into that website, you'll find this extensive course, 40 lessons and 5 hours of training. Family Search also has RootsTech. And if you keep clicking on view videos from RootsTech, you'll find out that there are in this case 4,435 videos, and they're on all different languages, and they are in all different places, all different levels. And it's another fabulous resource for uh, learning about genealogy. In addition, I mentioned earlier about learning handwriting recognition, doing handwriting. Uh, it's true that the computers are going to be able to do handwriting recognition, but where's the computer when you actually need it? And when will that probably be available to more regularly? By the way, just as a matter of note, if you were not aware, um, the Google Translate program has been expanded to translating documents and websites and all sorts of things. And so if you go to the Google Translate website and put in a copy of of a record that you haven't been able to read because of the language, it will probably do the translating. They basically have fairly recently increased the number of languages on Google Translate up to 283 languages, and they're on their way to putting up to 1,000 languages on the website to translate into all the different languages around. So but here's another website. This is the script tutorial, and you can, these another free set of lessons on learning how to read the handwriting. And I encourage you to attend a genealogical conference or workshop. One thing that we do find out about genealogy is that it's a pretty individual, not too social activity. And it's when we get together in groups like the UGA here, the Utah uh, I'm going to get it wrong if I say it, Utah Genealogical. Oh well, sorry. I just blocked my mind out now that I thought about it. But this something that I've known about now for years, and so you can tell my age is coming on here. But welcome to Roots Tech is coming around again, and you can attend in person if you would like a marvelous experience, or you can just sign in and be there free to watch it. Now, interesting happened. I submitted for a class on Roots Tech this year on Latin American research, which is what I've been doing consistently for the last few years. And they accepted it, and they told me it would be live. And so I immediately assumed that I'd be doing a classroom and all that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden I realized it said on the outline that it was live, but on the other place it said it was online. And I went, well, maybe they're going to broadcast it. And so my question was whether or not they were going to record it or whatever, what was going to happen here. Anyway, after sending a few emails off to Roots Tech, they finally clarified that yes, it's going to be online, which means it's online, but it's going to be a webinar, and it's going to be a live webinar during RootsTech online. So I'm going to be live, but I won't be in a classroom, and I'll be online, and then they will record it, and in this case, they're going to uh, give it Spanish language subtitles so that it can be used in Latin America. So that's a very interesting and very important thing. And then we have in NGA, National Genealogical Society, and their conferences, and they're going to online. So this will be something you can be doing. And if you really get uh, wanting to know a lot about a certain subject, you can read a book. These are some of kind of official uh, books that I would recommend strongly for these particular areas. This Tracing Your Scottish Ancestors. It's the official guide. It's in the seventh edition. These are hefty books. They're not just a little bit of pamphlet. These are extremely detailed about everything happening. And I am not aware of any book that has more information about English records than Ancestral Trails. It is a extensive treatise on all the records that are available and the sources for those records in actually in Great Britain, but primarily in England. And then in America, there's Val Greenwood's book on the Researcher's Guide to American Genealogy. And this is the book, by the way, that got me started because, as I mentioned, that I was kind of what you might call genealogically isolated and had no one in my immediate family was interested, and nobody in my extended family that I knew that wasn't already passed on was interested. And so basically, I was in the situation of trying to teach myself how to do this. And when I found this book, it basically began the process of actually learning the real things that I needed to know about genealogical research. And as far as the library, BYU Library, Family History Center is concerned, we have the virtual help desk on our website. So if you go to BYU Library Family History, you'll eventually click into this website or the older website. We have two of them up right now. They're transitioning over to this website, but you basically can go get help and eventually click join live, and then you have the virtual help desk. So in about it, if today's Saturday, and so the library, we're not there, the missionaries are not there in the library on Saturdays, or and only in the afternoon on Sunday, and it's not in basically it's not the library. The virtual help desk is only open during the week, but it's open uh, from noon till 8 o'clock at night, Monday through Thursday, and then noon to 6 on Friday. And it's free. And you just click, and you're talking to on a Zoom, open Zoom from the library, and you have no time limits, and you're able to do that. And you could go to a library, and that's where you can also go to the Family Search Library in Salt Lake and get genealogical help. These are help sessions that are limited to 20 minutes, uh, and you can sign up for one of these a week. So it's pretty a little if you have a specific question, and they may be scheduling as much as a month or so in advance. So this is not as fast as doing it through the BYU and just directly asking the missionaries who are available. And at the end of all this, or someplace in the middle, you may want to take a trip. Um, I, in our lives, my wife and I have spent a lot of time in different cemeteries, and we have become very much acquainted with cemeteries as we've gone through uh, doing research. Fortunately, most of the information that we need has not been uh, answered by cemeteries, and sometimes we run into some uh, very interesting anomalies, like one in which one of my direct line ancestors was buried in a cemetery in Pennsylvania about 20 years after he died. It turned out that he had been buried earlier in another cemetery, and they dug him up and moved him to this new one. But that took a little bit of research before we figured out why he'd been kept around uh, to be buried for a long time. And you might be surprised if you go to some of the larger libraries and ask them about genealogy. Many of the basic big genealogy libraries, like the New York Public Library and the Boston Library, and of course the Library of Congress and others, have uh, extensive genealogical resources. And once again, they're more like archives. In other words, there's a different way of approaching a library, mostly a little bit different than an archive. But they're both, you're going to have to understand how they work and what's available and how you can gain access to what's available. So there's a heading right here at the New York Public Library on genealogical research at the library. And there's always possibilities that the libraries have records which are not available anyplace else. They have unique records, and that's not unusual for any library to have unique records, even small libraries. In fact, we found unique records once in a library, uh, in a mobile home type library that had been converted from a mobile home in a small town in northern Arizona, and they had records that weren't available anyplace else. And visit an archive. This is an interior shot of the Maryland State Archives in Annapolis, and learning how to get access to and how to work with an archive may take some time, and it helps if you have time to spend, because you're not going to be able to walk in and get an instant answer to almost anything you ask. Will take some considerable time, days, if not weeks of time, to get access to the records that you're looking for. And don't forget university special collections libraries, and you may want to search their catalogs. Now you realize that as I'm telling you about each of these kinds of places to go to find information, that they're getting you out of your normal comfort zone. They are types of things that are used by researchers regularly, but only the researchers who have passed the point of worrying about staying in their comfort zone, because it's not comfortable to try to learn how to get into and use the records that are in these libraries as easily. They're not as easy as they might seem. So one thing you're going to find, that as your genealogical skills increase, you'll begin to see opportunities to discover more about your ancestral family. The amount of records and information that you can find, the artificial intelligence that I mentioned from Family Search, and what they've done is to the handwriting recognition has worked on deeds and probate records around the United States. And I made a search not too long ago when it came out, just to test how it would work, and basically turned up some deeds of my great grandfather who lived in northern Arizona in a place called Joseph City. Um, and that nobody had ever seen before except the original people who signed the deeds. And the reason why is because they're in the recorder's office in Navajo County, Arizona. And unless you sat there and went through the whole pile of deeds, you'd never find it. the only index to the deeds is the grantor grantee. That would be the person selling the property and buying the property or getting the mortgage or whatever. And any time, and all the other people who are in the deeds are not anywhere indexed. And so this putting an index of being able to search the full text of the document opens up a tremendous window into additional research that can be done. And that just basically takes people out of uh, their comfort zone because, and especially their rut, because that opens up areas that they had never imagined, and and gives additional information. Okay, well, thanks for watching. And do we have any questions?
We have a few comments online on Facebook that you might be interested in.
Okay.
First off, we had people telling us they are watching from all over the East Coast as well as out here in the West, in Idaho. But you might be interested in this comment from Karen. She says she loves it, Brother Tanner. Oh, we are former advisors, Ted and Karen Meyer from Scottsdale,
Oh,
just nodding and smiling and agreeing. I like it when they say they were born in a state before it was a state.
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Didn't have
that's
any questions beyond that comment.
Um,
okay.
it was an excellent, and I agree with them. I had been working on an outline for a class, and I went, "Wow, James, this is exactly what I was going to teach. I might as well cancel teaching this class." But the irony of it all is that all you've given us all core things that, and I like the one idea is that you have to be ready to learn and to get out of your comfort zone. And that's one thing a class and a mentor and all these resources help you to do is to get out of your comfort zone. And so many great resources that are now available. It's really wonderful. So,
Well, if when I have time and people answer back that they don't have any questions, I always say, well, I always have questions. And
yes, 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 yes. It's that
and I've al-
puzzle.
I've got questions I can't possibly answer,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
in the rest of my lifetime here on the earth. But uh, I really, and all they're saying to me is that they're comfortable where they are and they don't want to move any further. So,
I love the books that you put up there for beginning genealogists, and I know Greenwood was a delightful discovery for me, and I know each genealogical society will also have books on how to research in the local areas, and as I purchase those, it's always so good to draw on those expertise. And I know North Carolina helped me more with all of my research in the US than I'm trying to think what her name is. I wish I had a better memory for names, but just reading through that was just so helpful, and books can help, even thick books, and
well,
ancestors. Yeah.
I was working with someone who was looking for an immigrant from the Canary Islands to Puerto Rico,
Uh-huh.
which turns out many people
Yeah.
took that route.
Yeah.
It was a
Immigration.
big
Yeah.
draw, and found a series of books that
Yeah.
I had was not acquainted with up till yesterday about through a 6 or 7, 9 volume, I think 9 volume set of listing all the immigrants from the early 1500s to the 1700s. So to
Amazing,
Puerto
isn't
Rico.
it? Yeah. And then the ancestral trails, every time I go into a new county in England, when I open that up, he starts to describe resources that I had no clue that existed in contacts. And so even though it's in a book, it's still helping us online to even know to research for those resources. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
We have
for
one
sure.
additional comment online, James. Don, who is from South Carolina, indicated, "Thank you for new ideas for researching, especially the BYU library, which
Wow.
I didn't realize it was available
There we go. To anyone in the US or overseas that you can call
anywhere."
and
Yeah,
get help. Yes, that's so good. Also, the resource of the deeds, the AI research for deeds, that is like you, I have experienced so many breakthroughs that has been so helpful and saved my eyes from having to scroll through all those deeds. It's just been a great class. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All
Thank you,
right.
folks.
And I guess this concludes until next month then. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate your participation and have a great day.
Okay. See ya.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, James. Awesome.